Hey Reddit, it's Dave here. Life's been a whirlwind lately, and not in a good way. Buckle up because my seemingly normal life got turned upside down in a matter of months. I'm 34, a warehouse manager living in Columbus. My life wasn't flashy, but it was steady. I had a decent job, a nice house, and a marriage to Carla. We'd been together for 5 years, married for 3, and I thought we had a pretty good thing going. Sure, we weren't that romantic, lovey-dovey couple, but we were solid, or so I thought. Then, about 6 months ago, Carla decided to embark on a fitness journey. It seemed to come out of nowhere, but I supported her. She joined a fancy gym downtown, got a personal trainer named Justin, and suddenly her life revolved around meal prep, macros, and kale smoothies. At first, I was on board. I even pitched in more at home, dishes, laundry, groceries, so she'd have time to focus on her goals. I figured it was just another phase, like the time she got into knitting or tarot cards. But this wasn't just a phase. Slowly, things started to shift. The more weight Carla lost, the bigger her ego grew. She became obsessed with her reflection, spending hours in front of the mirror and snapping progress pics for Instagram. It wasn't just about her anymore. She wanted an audience. One Friday night, I suggested we watch a movie together, something we used to enjoy. She scoffed. "Dave, I don't have time to sit around. I have goals to crush." Goals? What goals? She wasn't training for a marathon or climbing Everest. She was lifting weights and drinking green sludge. But I let it slide. Maybe I was being unreasonable. Then, one morning, she dropped the bomb. I was half asleep, nursing my coffee while she downed one of her kale smoothies, dressed in her workout gear. Out of nowhere, she said, "I deserve more in life." I looked up, groggy. More of what? She put her glass down and stared at me, dead serious. "This marriage is holding me back, Dave. I'm filing for divorce." I thought she was joking. I even laughed, waiting for her to crack a smile. But her face was stone cold. "I've outgrown this," she said, like I was some outdated piece of furniture she was ready to toss. "You wouldn't understand." I was blindsided. Outgrown what? What are you even talking about? She sighed, as if explaining it to a child. "I've been working on myself, trying to be the best version of me. And frankly, this life doesn't match my potential anymore. I want more than this house, this routine, this you." Her words hit me like a freight train. She didn't even sugarcoat it. I was the problem. The life we'd built together wasn't good enough for her anymore. She grabbed her gym bag and walked out the door without a goodbye, leaving me staring at her half-empty glass of green sludge, wondering what the hell had just happened. That day at work was a blur. I went through the motions, but my mind was stuck on Carla. Was this real? Was she actually leaving me? We'd had arguments before, sure, but divorce? This felt sudden, calculated. The way she said it, like she'd rehearsed the speech, made it clear she'd been planning this for a while. Over the next few days, the cracks in our marriage became glaringly obvious. She barely spoke to me, except to discuss dividing up assets or setting up mediation. She stayed out late, claiming she was at the gym or with friends. Her phone was glued to her hand, and her Instagram was blowing up with selfies captioned, "New chapter, who this?" and "Living my best life." Every post was a slap in the face, a reminder that she'd already moved on mentally, even if the papers weren't signed yet. The final gut punch came one night while I was scrolling through my own social media. I noticed she deleted every photo of us. Wedding pictures, anniversary posts, everything. It was like I'd been scrubbed from her life entirely. Meanwhile, her new posts were racking up likes and comments. "You're glowing. Such an inspiration." It made me sick. None of these people knew the real Carla or what she was putting me through. One night, I overheard her on the phone in the kitchen, her tone sugary sweet. "Yeah, I just feel so free now. I'm finally doing what makes me happy. He doesn't even get it. He's stuck in the past." That was the moment it hit me. Carla wasn't just leaving me. She was reinventing herself, and I was the anchor she decided to cut loose. But here's the thing. I'm not the kind of guy to roll over and take it. Carla thought she could steamroll me and walk away with everything. She was in for a rude awakening. This was only the beginning. Carla wasted no time jumping into her new chapter. While I was still reeling from the sudden divorce announcement, She seemed to be thriving, or at least pretending to. Her social media became a shrine to her newfound freedom. Every post was more self-congratulatory than the last, living my truth, no more holding back, and my personal favorite, she's not a wife anymore. She's a force of nature. It was infuriating. While I was trying to figure out what went wrong and hold things together, Carla was busy parading around like a fitness influencer. Her captions screamed empowerment, but all I saw was someone running away from responsibility. It didn't take long to figure out who was fueling her ego. Justin, her personal trainer. At first, she kept it subtle, just casually mentioning his name. Justin says I'm the strongest I've ever been, or Justin recommended this amazing vegan restaurant. But then it escalated. One day, she strutted into the house after her workout, practically glowing. "Just so you know," she said, not even looking at me, "Justin and I are dating now. I think it's time you accept that." Oh, I accepted it all right. I accepted that my wife had turned into a full-blown caricature of entitlement. She wasn't even trying to hide the affair anymore. Friends started texting me, saying they'd spotted Carla and Justin all over town, holding hands, laughing, acting like the Instagram couple of the year. They weren't subtle. And Justin? He was exactly the type you'd expect. Spray-tanned, shredded, and about as deep as a puddle. The more I learned about him, the angrier I got. He wasn't just some gym bro. He was a professional homewrecker. My lawyer, Steve, absolute legend, did some digging and found that Justin had pulled this stunt before. Twice. He had a pattern. Find a married woman, pump her up with compliments, encourage her to leave her husband, and ride the wave until it wasn't convenient anymore. Then he'd vanish. It wasn't love. It was a hustle. And Carla? She was the perfect mark. She craved validation, and Justin had her wrapped around his finger. Meanwhile, Carla's demands were becoming more outrageous. She wanted half my savings, spousal support, and even the house. She thought she could walk into court, play the victim, and waltz out with everything she needed to fund her new life with Justin. But she didn't know what I knew. Steve and I were gathering evidence. Texts, bank statements, social media posts. Everything we needed to show the court exactly who Carla and Justin really were. In the meantime, their picture-perfect relationship was starting to show cracks. One night, I overheard Carla arguing with someone on the phone. "I don't care what your exes said about you, Justin. You're with me now, and I deserve better than your baggage." I didn't catch the rest, but it was clear their little fantasy wasn't as perfect as they wanted everyone to believe. Watching Carla go all in on Justin was oddly satisfying. She bet everything on this guy, thinking he was her ticket to a better life. But I knew it was only a matter of time before her house of cards came crashing down. That time came during mediation. Carla walked into the room with the confidence of Beyoncé, but she walked out looking like a deer in headlights. Justin, her ever-loyal cheerleader, sulked behind her, scrolling on his phone. It was beautiful. Steve and I had spent weeks preparing, and it showed. Carla's lawyer tried to paint her as the underappreciated wife who sacrificed everything for her husband's mediocre dreams. But Steve wasn't having it. He came armed with receipts, literally. He showed the court how Carla had drained our joint account for months before filing for divorce, spending thousands on spa days, designer clothes, and $200 dinners. And then came the kicker, Justin's history. Steve presented evidence of his past affairs, his pattern of sweet-talking married women, and how he always bailed when the money dried up. Carla's lawyer tried to object, but the damage was done. The judge wasn't buying their act. By the end of the session, Carla looked defeated. And Justin? He looked like he was already planning his exit strategy. Their empire of lies was starting to crumble, and I wasn't done yet. The day of the final court hearing arrived, and I walked into the courtroom ready for battle. Carla had strutted into mediation with overconfidence, but today was different. She wasn't wearing her usual designer outfit or carrying her smug grin. It was just her lawyer, and an energy that screamed defeat. On my side, Steve, the MVP of divorce lawyers, sat next to me with a binder so thick it looked like it could double as a doorstop. I wasn't nervous. Carla had already thrown every punch she had, and I was still standing. Today was about ensuring I didn't just survive, I won. Carla's lawyer started with her emotional compensation claim, painting her as the long-suffering wife who had been neglected by my refusal to support her growth. Apparently, my lack of enthusiasm for her fitness journey, aka her affair with Justin, was a form of emotional neglect. Steve let him dig his own hole. When it was our turn, Steve systematically dismantled every part of their argument. He started with evidence showing I had gone above and beyond to support Carla during her so-called fitness journey. He presented text messages where I'd encouraged her, taken over household chores, and even offered to join couples fitness classes to strengthen our bond. He painted a picture of a husband who had done everything to help his wife, only to be betrayed. Then came the financial bombshells. Steve revealed how Carla had drained $223,000 from our joint account in the months leading up to the divorce. He showed bank statements proving she'd used the money not for household expenses but for luxury items, designer clothes, spa days, and high-end dining. Carla's lawyer tried to push back, claiming it was part of her coping mechanism. But the judge wasn't buying it. Coping mechanisms do not justify financial recklessness, he said sharply. And then came Justin. Steve presented evidence of his history, how he'd preyed on married women, hyped them up, and abandoned them once their money ran out. Steve even brought in messages from one of Justin's exes, warning Carla about his manipulative tactics. The cherry on top? Carla's journal. Steve had subpoenaed it, and in one entry, Carla had written about her master plan to leave me, take everything she could in the divorce, and use the settlement money to fund her new life with Justin. The courtroom was dead silent as the judge flipped through the journal. His expression grew heavier with each page. Carla squirmed in her seat, her polished nails nervously drumming against the table. When the judge finally spoke, his tone was icy. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, "your request for emotional compensation lacks any substantive evidence. While emotional distress is a valid consideration in some cases, this court requires demonstrable proof. Your claims are based on subjective feelings, not facts." He turned to Steve. "The evidence presented by Mr. Patterson demonstrates a consistent pattern of support during the marriage. The bank statements and communication logs show no indication of emotional neglect. Quite the opposite, in fact." Then came the verdict on the house. Carla had argued she was entitled to half, claiming she had contributed emotionally if not financially. Steve shut that down with records proving I'd paid the mortgage in full, handled renovations, and maintained the property entirely on my own. "The house will remain the property of Mr. Patterson," the judge declared. "Mrs. Patterson, you have no financial claim to it." Carla's jaw dropped. The judge wasn't done. "Furthermore," he continued, "due to the unauthorized use of marital funds, Mrs. Patterson is ordered to reimburse Mr. Patterson in the amount of $23,750. You could have heard a pin drop." Carla's lawyer slumped in his chair, defeated. Carla, meanwhile, looked like the wind had been knocked out of her. The ruling was final. No appeals, no loopholes. As the judge closed his folder, he said, "This court is adjourned." Walking out of that courtroom felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. Justice had been served, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Carla trailed behind her lawyer, her head hanging low. For someone who had entered this process like a reality TV star, she now looked utterly defeated. Steve patted me on the back as we left. "We did it," he said with a small smile. And we had. But Carla's downfall wasn't over yet. After the court's ruling, Carla's world began to crumble. She was ordered to vacate the house within 30 days, and I made sure she stuck to that deadline. She tried to stall, claiming she needed more time to get her affairs in order. But I reminded her that she'd had plenty of time to prepare while flaunting her affair with Justin all over town. On moving day, she loaded her designer luggage into a beat-up car, loaned by one of her dwindling friends, and drove off without so much as a goodbye. The house, once filled with tension and resentment, suddenly felt peaceful. But Carla's financial situation spiraled quickly. Without access to my income or the marital funds she'd been draining, she was left scrambling. She tried selling her designer clothes and handbags, but it wasn't enough to cover the debt she owed me. Friends began to distance themselves, tired of her endless sob stories and borrowing requests. And then there was Justin. He disappeared entirely. He stopped answering her calls, stopped showing up to their gym sessions, and even blocked her on Instagram. Word got around that he'd moved on to another client, a younger, flashier woman without the baggage of a messy divorce. I could hear Carla pacing the house, calling him repeatedly before she moved out. "Justin, call me back. We need to talk," she'd plead, her voice tinged with desperation. Eventually, one of her friends spilled the tea. Justin had officially ghosted her, cutting ties as soon as things got tough. Carla's dream man had turned out to be just another illusion. Her Instagram posts, once filled with confidence and empowerment, became sporadic and increasingly cryptic. Instead of "living my best life," she was posting things like, "Sometimes people aren't who they seem," and "You can't build an empire with someone who's playing games." Her glamorous lifestyle disappeared overnight. The gym visits stopped, the outfits were replaced with sweatpants, and her once flawless social media feed went silent. It was like her entire identity had been tied to Justin and their fantasy of a perfect life. Without him, she didn't know what to do. Then came her last-ditch attempt. One evening, about 2 weeks after the court ruling, Carla showed up at the house unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there, looking nothing like the confident woman who had walked out on our marriage. Her hair was messy, her eyes were tired, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Dave," she said softly, her voice cracking, "can we talk?" I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "What do you want, Carla?" She hesitated, wringing her hands. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I made mistakes. Big ones. I let Justin manipulate me. I got caught up in this fantasy and I ruined everything." Her words sounded rehearsed, but the desperation in her eyes was real. She wasn't here out of genuine remorse. She was here because she had nowhere else to turn. "I don't know what you expect me to say," I replied, my tone calm but firm. "You made your choices. You chose Justin. You tried to take everything from me. And now you're dealing with the fallout." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Can we at least be civil? Maybe start over? I have nothing, Dave. I'm lost." I stared at her for a moment, feeling nothing but resolve. "Carla," I said, "I gave you everything. My support, my trust, my love, and you threw it all away. You don't get to come back now and ask for a second chance. That's not how this works." She broke down, sobbing on my porch. But I didn't flinch. After a moment, I stepped back inside and closed the door, leaving her outside with her regrets. After that night, I never saw Carla again. The chapter of my life that she dominated was finally closed. She tried reaching out a couple more times. Texts, emails, even a handwritten letter left in my mailbox, but I didn't respond. I'd made my decision, and there was no going back. Word got around that Carla was still struggling to get back on her feet. She burned bridges with friends, lost her social media following, and couldn't seem to keep steady work. Last I heard, she was couch surfing with a distant relative, trying to piece her life back together. Justin, of course, was long gone. He'd moved on to his next victim, leaving Carla to deal with the wreckage on her own. It was almost poetic in a way. She'd built her entire identity around him, only to have it all fall apart when he showed his true colors. As for me, I focused on rebuilding my life. The house that once felt like a battleground was now a sanctuary. I repainted the walls, replaced the furniture Carla had insisted on, and finally made the space my own. It wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about reclaiming my peace. I started picking up old hobbies I'd put on hold during our marriage. I reconnected with friends I drifted away from and even took a solo trip to the mountains. A getaway I didn't realize I needed until I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring out at the vast expanse below. For the first time in years, I felt free. I've also learned a lot about myself through this process. I learned to stand up for myself, to set boundaries, and to prioritize my happiness. I realized that it's okay to walk away from people who don't value you, even if it's painful in the moment. I don't hate Carla. I don't even hold a grudge. She made her choices, and she's living with the consequences. But I don't pity her either. She had every chance to make better decisions and chose not to. One thing I've come to understand is that moving on isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about not letting it define you. Carla may have tried to tear me down, but I'm stronger for it. These days, I'm in a much better place. Mentally, emotionally, and even physically. Life is simpler, quieter, and filled with the kind of peace I didn't realize I'd been missing. And the best part? I'm not looking back. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this. You don't have to settle for less than you deserve. Life's too short to waste on people who don't respect or appreciate you. So here's to new beginnings, second chances, the kind you give yourself, and living life on your own terms. Thanks for sticking with me through this wild ride. Reddit? It wasn't easy, but I'm finally where I'm meant to be.